we are going to listen to chapter 4 in Warhorse. And you can see that I have a notepad and I have it labeled with the title and the chapter and the pages that I'm going to read. However, I didn't give you any hints on strategies today, and that's for a very specific reason. There are tons of strategies that you could pull out of this chapter. So I want you to be creative. I'll talk about a few of them as I read, but I want you to be creative and decide which ones that you feel like lends itself to this chapter, and you can do your own work. Chapter 4. Tying a long rope to the halter, he walked me out of the stable. I went with him because Zoe was out there looking back over her shoulder at me, and I was always happy to go anywhere and with anyone as long as she was with me. All the while I noticed that Albert's father was speaking in a hushed voice, and he was looking around him like a thief. So if you remember from chapter 3, he had tied a rope around Joey's neck, and he was leading him out. And he had sent Albert to town, and now he's being very quiet. So he's up to something. This is all foreshadowing. He must have known that I would follow old Zoe, because he roped me up to her saddle and led us both quietly out of the yard, down the path, and over the bridge. Once in the road, he mounted Zoe swiftly, and we trotted up the hill and into the village. He never spoke a word to either of us. I knew the road well enough, of course, for I had been there often enough with Albert, and indeed I loved going there because there was always other horses to meet and people to see. It was in the village only a short time before that I had met my first motor car outside the post office and had stiffened with fear as it rattled past. But I had stood steady, and I remember that Albert had made a big fuss over me after that. But now, as we neared the village, I could see that several motor cars were parked around the green, and there was a greater gathering of men and horses than I had ever seen. Excited as I was, I remember that a sense of deep apprehension came over me as we trotted up into the village. All right, so deep apprehension makes us think that something's going to happen. This is more foreshadowing. There were men in khaki uniforms everywhere, and then, as Albert's father dismounted and led us up past the church toward the green, a military band struck up a rousing, pounding march. The pulse of the great bass drum beat out through the village, and there were children everywhere, some marching up and down with broomsticks over their shoulders, and some leaning out of the windows waving flags. As we approached the flagpole in the center of the green, where the Union Jack hung limp in the sun against the white pole, an officer pushed through the crowd toward us. He was tall and elegant in his jodhpurs and military belt, with a silver sword at his side. Okay, so another strategy that we might not have done in a while is unfamiliar words. I think I'll take that one on. And jodhpur, let's make sure I spell it right. Those are like trousers, pants that men wore that were real tight fitting down around the ankles when they were riding horses. It just made it easier and more comfortable for them to ride horses, especially while they were in the military. He shook Albert's father by the hand. "I told you I'd come, Captain Nichols, sir," said Albert's father. Okay, so they've already talked before. This is a captain. "It's because I need the money. You understand. Wouldn't part with a horse like this unless I had to." Now we see that he's about to sell his horse and to the military. And since the title of the book is War Horse, he's probably selling this horse to be used for the war purposes. "Well, farmer," said the officer, nodding his appreciation as he looked me over, "I thought you'd be exaggerating when we talked in the George last evening." All right, the George. I'm going to write that word down because that is a word that I'm not really familiar with, but I did look it up, and it's like a hotel. So they met in the George last evening. finest horse in the parish, you said, but then everyone says that. But this one is different. I can see that. And he smoothed my neck gently and scratched me behind my ears. Both his hand and his voice were kind. I didn't shrink away from him. You're right, farmer. He'd make a fine mount for my regiment, and we'd be proud to have him. I wouldn't mind using him myself. No, I wouldn't mind at all. If it turns out to be all he looks, then he'd suit me well enough. Fine-looking animal, no question about it. 40 pounds you'll pay me. Okay, so pounds is what the currency or money is referred to in England. So this is money. And 40 pounds, I looked that up, that's about equivalent to 54 US dollars. So he's going to sell Joey for about 54 bucks. 40 pounds you'll pay me, Captain Nichols, like you promised yesterday, Albert's father said in a voice that was unnaturally low. So again, he's still talking low. He didn't talk all the way to the village, and he was being very quiet as he was loading on. So this all lets you know the kind of mood that he felt, almost as if he were sad. So he says, Albert's father said in a voice that was unnaturally low, almost as if he did not want to be heard by anyone else. I can't let him go for a penny less. A man's got to live. So again, we go back to those pressures that we talked about yesterday. He's under pressure because of his mortgage and he can't afford to pay it. So he's decided that he doesn't need Joey and that he could sell Joey for money to help pay for the mortgage. That's what I promised you last evening, Farmer, Captain Nichols said, opening my mouth and examining my teeth. He's a fine young horse, strong neck, sloping shoulder, straight fetlocks. Fetlocks are like at the bottom of the horse's legs, kind of around their calves. And so he sees that they're strong. So he's looking him over and he's making sure that he's in good shape so that he would be in good shape to be a war horse for them to ride as they enter combat. Done much work, has he? Have you taken him hunting? Well, my son rides him every day, said Albert's father. He tells me that he goes like a racer and he jumps like a hunter. Well, said the officer, as long as our vet passes him as fit and sound in wind and limb, you'll have your 40 pounds as we agreed. I can't be long, sir, Albert's father said, glancing back over his shoulder. I have to get back. I have my work to see to. Well, we're busy recruiting in the village as well as buying, said the officer, but we'll be as quick as we can for you. True, there's a lot more good men volunteers than there are good horses in these parts, so the vet doesn't have to examine the men, does he? You wait here. I'll only be a few minutes. Captain Nichols led me away through the archway opposite the pub and into a large yard where there were men in white coats and a uniformed clerk sitting down at a table taking notes. I thought I heard old Zoe calling after me, so I shouted back to reassure her, for I felt no fear at this moment. I was too interested in what was going on around me. The officer talked to me gently as we walked away, so I went along almost eagerly. The vet, a small bustling man with a bushy black mustache, prodded me all over, lifted each of my feet to examine them, which I objected to, and then peered into my eyes and my mouth, sniffing at my breath. Then I was trotted around and around the yard before he pronounced me a perfect specimen. Sound as a bell, fit for anything, cavalry or artillery. So I know that artillery probably has to do with shooting or whatever, but I wasn't real sure about cavalry. So when I looked up cavalry, it was about like his mindset, mentally. So he's saying that mentally he would be prepared and be okay to go to war, and he would also be okay to fight, or to ride the men who were fighting. No splints, no lame, good feet and teeth. Buy him, Captain, he said. He's a good one. So I was led back to Albert's father, who took the offered money from Captain Nichols, stuffing it quickly into his trouser pocket. You'll look after him, sir, he said. You'll see he comes to no harm. My son's very fond of him, you see. He reached out and he brushed my nose with his hand. There were tears filling his eyes. All right, so let me stop just for a second. Let's think about this. If you think about how we described Albert's father in the beginning and how we created the character attribute chart and we wrote down some attributes of him, he's sounding quite different now. He's teary-eyed, he's very calm, he's very quiet, he seems nervous, he seems sad about getting rid of him. He seems apologetic by continuing to say I wouldn't be selling him if I didn't need the money. So this would lend itself to how characters change. You could draw a picture of Albert's dad in the middle of the page, and on each side you could write attributes of how he was in the beginning of the story and how he's acting at this moment. At that moment, he became almost a likable man to me. So likable, that reminds me of the strategy we did with unlikable and likable traits. You can do it that way as well. You'll be all right, old son, he whispered to me. You won't understand, and neither will Albert, but unless I sell you, I can't keep up with the mortgage, and we will lose the farm. I've treated you bad. I've treated everyone bad. I know it, and I'm sorry for it. Wow, he's apologetic. And he walked away from me, leaving Zoe behind him. His head was lowered, and he looked suddenly like a shrunken man. It was then that I fully realized I was being abandoned, and I began to neigh, a high-pitched cry of pain and anxiety that shrieked out through the village. Even old Zoe, obedient and placid as she was, this just means calm, was stopped and would not be moved, no matter how hard Albert's father pulled her. She turned, tossed up her head, and shouted her farewell, but her cries became weaker, and she was finally dragged away and out of my sight. Kind hands tried to contain me and to console me, but I was inconsolable. I had just about given up all hope when I saw my Albert running toward me through the crowd, his face red with exertion. Exertion, meaning that he was really tired. The band had stopped playing, and the entire village looked on as he came up to me and he put his arms around my neck. He sold him, hasn't he? He said quietly, looking up at Captain McNichols, who was holding me. Joey is my horse. He's my horse, and he will always be, no matter who buys him. I can't stop my father from selling him, but if Joey goes with you, I go. I want to join and stay with him. Well, you've got the right spirit for a soldier, young man, said the officer, taking off his peaked cap and wiping his brow with the back of his hand. He had black curly hair and a kind, open look on his face. You've got the spirit, but you just haven't got the years. You're too young, and you know it. 17's the youngest age we can take. Come back in a year or so, and then we'll see. I look 17, Albert said, almost pleading. I'm bigger than most 17-year-olds. But even as he spoke, he could see he was getting nowhere. You won't take me then, sir? Not even as a stable boy? I'll do anything. What's your name, young man? Captain Nichols asked. Narcott, sir. Albert Narcott. Well, Mr. Narcott, I'm sorry, but I can't help you. The officer shook his head and replaced his cap. I'm sorry, young man. Regulations. But don't you worry about your Joey. I shall take good care of him until you're ready to join us. You've done a fine job with him. You should be proud of him. He's a fine horse, but your father needed the money for the farm, and a farm won't run without money. You must know that. I like your spirit, so when you're old enough, you must come and join the cavalry. We need men like you, and it'll be I fear, longer than people think. Mention a long war, I fear, longer than people think. Mention my name. I'm Captain Nichols, and I'd be proud to have you with us. There's no way then? Albert asked. There's nothing I can do? Nothing, said Captain Nichols. Your horse belongs to the army now, and you're too young to join up. Don't you worry. We'll look after him. I'll take personal care of him, and that's a promise. Albert rubbed my nose for me, as he often did, and stroked my ears. He was trying to smile, but could not. I'll find you again, you old silly, he said quietly. Wherever you are, I'll find you, Joey. Take good care of him, please, sir, till I find him again. There's not another horse like him. Not in the whole world. You'll find that out. Say you promise?" "I promise," said Captain Nichols. "I'll do everything I can." And Albert turned and went away through the crowd until I could see him no more. So I mentioned that there were a lot of words here. Cavalry can also be like the group of men that they have that are fighting against other men. I wrote down these words as my strategy. You might want to do how characters change. You might want to do unlikable traits. You might want to do character pressures again, and this time do it with Joey and do it with Albert. You could do, if you're artistic and you like to draw, you could draw a picture of one of the scenes. The author describes the way the men look, and you could draw the scene where Joey is with the veterinarian, or you could draw the scene when Albert's running to try to keep Joey from being sold. Whatever you would like to draw. Be creative with your strategy. If you do this on notebook paper, be sure that you upload it and submit it in Canvas, or you can just do it in a box that's provided for you in Canvas. Have fun doing your work and being creative.